We're starting a new section of code, some notes. We're going to be looking at Spring, exploring advices in aspect-oriented programming, kind of like a continuation off of the previous thing. So here we're going to be setting up a project to explore advices. We are using code that can be found in previous videos in the playlist link below the like button. We set all this up earlier, but we'll go over it really quickly here. So first we have our POM XML file. This is our dependencies that we have included with it. And then we have our application context XML. We'll go over that soon. We have our public class item, which has these variables, setters, getters, and then some printing methods right here. We have our AspectConfig, and we'll be going over this in a second. We have our detail publisher, which is an interface, but we're not going to be looking at that yet. We have our item list, and this item list has a variable of type list, and then it has some printing methods right here. And then we have an add item to the list. Oh, this should be at index. I just realized I made that mistake, but if we have the same thing here, we should probably be consistent. Well, anyways, we've changed this to at index. We have our main, which we're not going to be touching at the moment. We're not running anything here. We have our app context wrapper, but we'll get into that in a second. And then our app devices / item, which we'll get into in a second, and then order as well. So we'll get into all of these. So we are going to make a new class that is like our application context. It's just represented in a single class. It's going to be the application context wrapper. So inside of here, we can see we have private static application context. We're storing it in context, and we're basically passing in our application context XML file in here. That's what gets passed in. There's only going to be one instance of this ever because it's static. It's static because the XML file contains our beans and we want to access the same beans, and this can be from like different portions of our app. We then have this private method right here, which is empty, and then we have like a getter right here. We're going to want to create a new package inside of our Loonycorn. Inside of here, we're going to call it Aop Devices, and then we're going to make two classes. We're going to make item and order. So in here, we have our item class. This is going to be Aop Devices / item. It's different from our other item, but very similar. So we have these variables here. We're going to have two constructors here, one that's like empty and then one that has parameters. And then we're going to have a toString method, but that's going to be it. We're not going to have any getters or setters inside of here. We have another class, and it's order, and it represents the order of our items. It's slightly different from item list, however it's very similar as well. So we have our variables in here. We're going to be using a map for our item in integer for order items and key. We're going to have getting an order ID, we have our setters, and then we're going to go down here. We have our printing right here. It's formatting for how this is printed. Just a quick go over. We have our format being stored in here, and then when we do our sysout.println format, we're going to pass in these names. So we're going to pass in item, price, quantity, and then they're going to get formatted here. It's really important inside of this for loop. We're going to go through every iteration of this map, so every time that there's at least one thing in here, we're going to go through here and we're going to want to print it out using this format that we have up here. Inside of this format right here, this part is going to be formatting our entity.getT item name. So this is going to be formatting the item name. This formats the item price, and then this is formatting our entry.getValue. So that's how our format would work, but that's for a separate video. We're just not worrying about the syntax here. We have our sysout.println, printing out here, and then we have a getOrderValue, and in this one we're basically totaling the entire order. So everything in our map needs to get totaled up. We need to run through our entire map with a for each loop. We're going to store into our total price the entry.getKey. So we're using this to go through. So we're going to get the key, and we're going to get the item price from our key, and then we're going to multiply it by the value. So we're multiplying how many of this is inside of here by this value, and then we're adding it to our total price, and then we just return total price in the end. Going back to our AspectConfig file, it's all the way back here, we can see that we have a join point inside of here, and it's just going to be printing out where this joint point is. So we will be putting annotations that we've previously used here in our XML file, not our Java ones. So we can actually just clear this before in point cut. We're going to want to use these later, annotations, but right now we're going to go into our XML file to deal with these. So if you've been following with our previous videos, we can see that our XML file is like more bare than last time. So I cleared it out, and now we're going to rewrite everything. So now it looks a little bit more populated. This is all like prefix. We have to have this. We're going to make our Aop configuration right here. So this is our point cut, and this is happening before. Basically, just refresher, we have our aspect ID, so we have myAspect, and it's referencing myAspectConfig. We have this ID, display methods right here, and then we have our expression, and our expression where this is happening. So we're execution, and this is any kind of public, private, void, string, whatever is going to execute, and it's only for Aop devices.order, and it's only for display order items. So it's only going to be for this specific method right here that it's going to be displaying. Now, before this displays, we want to have our print logo. We have our point cut reference, display methods, print logo. Remember, our display methods is going to be inside of display order items, which is inside our AOP, which is inside order. So that should be display order items here. Now, what about the other one? The other one is going to be our print logo. This print logo is going to be in our AspectConfig, where we print our logo right here. We have to have this @aspect beforehand to actually get it to be right here. It's going to search through our files and then look for that. It's a little bit easier to see when we do it in the .java instead of the XML, but we'll get to that later. And then in here, we're just making a bean. So we're just putting these properties in. Now for order items, it's a map, right? So we need a key. Now inside of our map, we can have multiple keys, right? So we're going to have entry as item bean 1. This is key 1. And then we have entry, item bean 2. This is 2. I'll just change the values right here. And so we have 2 different keys inside of our map. So our map has 2 different keys and the values are null currently. And then we're going to want to fill these. We have item bean 1 and item bean 2. Remember, our map is going to be of type item and then integer. So we have an integer of like some value, and then we have this item right here, and this item is going to be for what we have inside of here. So going back into here, this item, this key for our map is going to be this right here. So we have this item ID class. And remember, item again is its own class up here. So then we're going to use these constructor args to fill in these values. So those are creating both of our beans. Now that that's all created, we can look into our main. And in the next video, in the playlist link below that like button, we are going to focus on exploring aspects and running our program.